Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, General. Thank you, of course, for being here and for your incredible sacrifice and service to our country. Let me move right to the Afghan general elections in 2014. When we met, we agreed that it would be difficult to overstate the importance of those elections. In your assessment, what needs to happen between now and April of 14 to ensure that the elections are not only free and fair, but recognized to be free and fair by the Afghan public?
Senator, the first precondition for successful elections is obviously the security environment. And so, as I mentioned earlier, summer of 2013, from my perspective, is very important. We need to emerge from the summer of 2013 with security in those areas, particularly those areas that are important to the elections. We need to emerge from the summer of 2013 with a perception of security so that people want to participate in the elections. I think one of the things that will determine whether they're viewed as free and fair is if they're inclusive. And so, you know, I mentioned there's 7,000 polling stations, and we need to make sure that there's security such that people have access to those polling stations in April. So from a security perspective, that's very important. The Minister of Interior has the lead on security. We are decisively engaged, and my intent is to provide whatever support the Afghan National Security Forces need us to provide to make sure the elections are successful in 2014.
Let me move to the ALP, the Afghan Local Police. We talked about their important role, and you talked about how the Taliban sees that program. And if my memory is right, you said that the ALP is one of the most significant issues that the Taliban will have to address in order to be successful. Do you still hold that view? To what extent does the ALP need to be funded and manned at high levels? And is the ALP a sustainable initiative as we draw down our coalition troops?
Senator, I absolutely continue to believe that the ALP is critical to our success. It's an important component in that layered security concept I spoke to earlier, and for all the reasons I spoke about, I have confidence in their ability. We have about 21,000, what they call guardians, a member of the ALP today. There's planned growth for 30,000. The Minister of Interior has requested to grow that figure to 45,000. What I have asked my staff to do is review that in June or July this year to ensure that we don't look at the ALP other than in the full context of Afghan security forces and the effect that we're trying to achieve post-2014. But I'm a big believer in the Afghan Local Police Initiative. I believe it's one of the critical components of security post-2014, and I believe it's sustainable. And it has Afghan ownership right now. I mean, in many cases, it's the Afghans who are identifying the areas where we want ALP to, where they want ALP to be established.
Yeah, I don't think you could overstate, or I could overstate, the utility of local ownership in the sense that these police forces work for us, not for the coalition, not for anybody else, but for the local communities. Let me move to the heavy responsibility you have, and that is that you're simultaneously preparing for this year's fighting season and you're planning for troop reductions over the next 20 minutes. In your opening statement, you mentioned a range of capabilities and units that the ISAF, the Afghan Security Forces, currently lack. And in that light, would you recommend that aviation assets, EOD support, and other capabilities be provided by our military after 2014? And on a related note, will the U.S. government civilian agencies be able to sustain their current levels of personnel and assistance without having a robust NATO military network in place?
Senator, there are certain capability gaps, and you highlighted the most important ones, and I would say the most important one would be close air support. And so I would recommend, where appropriate, that we would provide close air support to the Afghans post-2014. We've seen several times recently where the absence of that kind of close air support created difficulties for Afghan forces, and we will not have addressed the capabilities of the Afghan Air Forces till 2015 or 2016. That's the program of record as it currently exists. So there will be a gap between 2014 and the full operational capability of the Afghan Air Force. When that gap exists, where it's important to sustain our success, I would recommend that we provide that support. With regard to the civilian agencies, earlier I mentioned that I believe we should be in the four corners of Afghanistan post-2014. One of the reasons why I believe that is not only to provide the right level of advise and assist to our Afghan counterparts, but also to support the U.S. government interagency. And Ambassador Cunningham in Kabul and I have complete integration in terms of planning for post-2014. I understand what his requirements are from an embassy perspective, and they're part of our planning for post-2014.
I won't ask you to answer this question, but I think it all is incumbent on all of us to think about the President's, as in President Karzai's, behaviors and comments at times about air support, about our soft forces and the like, and we should consider what his reaction will be to the continuation of close air support moving forward. I just make that comment. Let me turn to sequestration, if I might. What are your concerns? To what extent will sequestration have a negative effect on the mission and the readiness of the troops that will rotate into that theater between now and 2014 and perhaps beyond?
Senator, you hit it exactly right. From my perspective, I've been told that sequestration won't affect the resources that we have available to our men and women on the ground inside of Afghanistan, and I believe that. My greatest concern is that it'll impact the readiness of those units who are at home station preparing to deploy to Afghanistan. I think one of the great success stories over the last 10 years has been the quality training and equipping that we provided to our young men and women in uniform. Training today, there's no comparison to what training was earlier in my career. That's as a result of the support of the Congress. That's as a result of leadership learning lessons over the last 10 years. And I think it's very, very important that we sustain that same high level of training in the coming years because we'll still have people in harm's way.
Let me move back to the Taliban and the threats that they present, but also the opportunity for the Afghan government and for us. I think we share the concern that the Taliban could become viewed by the public as the best arbitrator in dispute resolutions. If the national government or even provincial officials are viewed as corrupt, then Afghans could be tempted to turn to the Taliban and their courts to resolve their problems. And then if you add into that the sense that the Afghan government's predatory actor that takes private land unfairly or without compensation, that provides the Taliban power and influence potentially. Is it reasonable to expect that these types of practices, which are counterproductive, can be halted?
Senator, I believe it's not so much halting them as providing an alternative, which would cause them to be irrelevant. And I do believe that dispute resolution is a core function of subnational governance in Afghanistan, and it's one of the critical areas. The rule of law in general is one of the critical areas that the Afghans have to improve in order for our success to be sustainable in the future. There's no question about it.
General, again, thank you for your service. Thanks for making the long trip here from theater. I look forward to working with you as we move forward at this really crucial point and time in our involvement in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.